It was late November of 2017 when Mark Calder transferred to Hillstone University, a mid-sized campus in upstate New York known for its architecture program, and less publicly, its unusually high dropout rate among first-year residents of Parker Hall. Mark didn't know about the latter, at least, not until much later. Parker Hall was a tall, narrow building, constructed in the 1960s, but renovated in the early 2000s. It was cleaner and brighter than most dorms on campus, with smooth concrete hallways and brushed metal railings on the staircases. But the elevator was perpetually out of order, forcing residents to use the dim stairwells at all hours. Mark was assigned a single room on the 6th floor, tucked in a corner where the hallway bent sharply, creating a dead end with only his door. The window overlooked a parking lot that, at night, seemed more like a black void. The first night, as he unpacked, he noticed how unnervingly quiet it was. No music from other rooms, no laughter or chatter from the hallway, just the low hum of the building's heating system and the occasional groan of the pipes. The first unsettling event was small. He had been up late sketching for class when he heard what sounded like someone knocking faintly, not on his door, but on the wall behind his bed. 3 taps, evenly spaced. He froze, listening. The sound didn't repeat. He eventually convinced himself it was the pipes. A week later, he heard it again. Same pattern. 3 soft knocks from inside the wall. This time, he got up and pressed his ear against the plaster. Faintly, through the cold surface, he could hear what sounded like movement, a slow scrape, as though something was shifting or dragging along the inside of the wall cavity. Then, silence. He mentioned it to a classmate who lived on the 5th floor, but they shrugged. Parker's got weird acoustics, they said. Sound bounces around, probably from another room. But Mark wasn't so sure. His corner room didn't share that wall with anyone. On the other side was just the stairwell, concrete and empty. Things escalated in early December. One night, around 3:20 a.m., he woke to find his desk chair turned toward the bed. He was certain he hadn't left it that way. Another night, he caught movement in his peripheral vision, something low and fast, darting across the corner of his room. He turned the lights on immediately, but nothing was there. Then came the incident in the stairwell. It was a Thursday evening, and he had just finished a late studio session. He was climbing the stairs to the 6th floor, the stairwell lit only by a dim yellow bulb on each landing. As he reached the 5th floor, he paused because he could hear someone above him, walking slowly, their footsteps in perfect sync with his own, but always one flight ahead. He climbed faster, his breath fogging in the cold air. The footsteps kept pace. When he reached the 6th floor landing, the sound stopped. The metal door to his hallway was slightly ajar, swaying softly. He pushed it open, stepped inside, and realized the hallway lights were out. Only the faint glow from the exit sign illuminated the far end of the corridor. And in that dim red light, at the corner near his room, he saw a shape. It was just barely visible, slouched low, its head tilted unnaturally as if it were listening to the floor. Mark froze, the air tightening in his chest. The figure didn't move. He backed toward the stairwell door, never breaking eye contact. But when his hand found the doorknob, the hallway lights flickered on. The corner was empty. Image 8. That night, he locked his door and pushed his dresser in front of it. But around 4 a.m., he woke again, this time to the sound of something dragging along the hallway outside. Not footsteps, something heavier, slower. He lay there, staring at the ceiling, every nerve taut. The dragging stopped right outside his door. Then came the breathing. Low, shallow, but definitely there. He clutched his phone, ready to dial campus security, when he heard 3 distinct knocks, not on the door, but on the wall behind his bed. The next morning, exhausted and pale, he went to the front desk to request a room change. The clerk, an older man who'd worked there for decades, gave him a long, unreadable look. 6th floor, corner room? He asked. Mark nodded. The man sighed. You're the third this semester. I'll see what I can do. Later that week, as he was packing, a girl from down the hall approached him. She looked hesitant, almost afraid to speak. Did you see it? She asked quietly. The thing that listens through the walls? Mark didn't answer. He just left and never went back to Parker Hall. The following semester, the university quietly sealed off his old room, citing maintenance issues. But those who lived on the floor said they could still hear it. 3 knocks, late at night, from a room that no one lived in anymore. It was October of 2012 when Claire Bennett first stepped into the dormitory of West Ridge University, a modest, ivy-covered building whose creaking hallways and weathered wooden floors had long since lost their shine. The smell hit her before anything else, stale air tinged with the faint scent of old paper, dust, and something else she couldn't quite name. Something faintly metallic. The building was one of the oldest on campus, reserved for graduate students and those who didn't mind historic charm, as the school called it. Claire had been late to apply for housing, and this was all that was left. Her room was on the 4th floor, down a narrow corridor that seemed too long for the size of the building. The overhead lights flickered with a low hum, and each footstep echoed unnaturally, as if the sound lingered longer than it should. Her key struggled in the lock, turning reluctantly before the heavy wooden door gave way. The room inside was small but functional. A single bed, a desk pressed against the wall beneath a tall, thin window, and a closet that looked like it had been built into the wall decades ago. On the first night, Claire noticed the cold. Not the kind of chill you'd expect in an old building in autumn. It was sharper, almost biting, as if it came from within the walls themselves. The radiator clanked and groaned but offered no real heat. She bundled herself in blankets and told herself it was just the age of the place. The first strange thing happened on her 3rd night. She was lying in bed, half asleep, when she heard the sound of footsteps in the hallway. They were slow and deliberate, growing closer, then stopping directly outside her door. She waited for a knock, but none came. Just silence. Then, the faintest sound, almost imperceptible, of someone breathing. Not the easy rhythm of sleep, but a slow, uneven inhalation, followed by an equally strained exhale. She sat up, heart pounding, listening intently. The breathing went on for several minutes before fading, the footsteps retreating in the opposite direction. When she gathered the courage to peek out into the hallway, there was nothing. The next morning, she asked her neighbor across the hall, a quiet, pale girl named Laura, if she'd heard anything strange. Laura froze for a moment, her eyes shifting toward Claire's door before she muttered, "You should keep it locked. Always." She didn't elaborate, and Claire didn't press her. Classes kept her distracted for the next week, but each night brought new disturbances. Soft scratching sounds from inside the walls. The closet door creaking open by itself, despite her shutting it before bed. Once, she woke to find her desk chair moved several feet closer to her bed. She tried to convince herself she'd done it without remembering, maybe while studying late, but unease gnawed at her. One night, as she was reading in bed, she heard something from inside the closet. At first, it was faint, like fabric shifting. Then came a distinct thud, as if something heavy had dropped inside. She stared at the door, debating whether to check, but a deep sense of dread rooted her in place. The air felt heavier, and that strange metallic scent seemed stronger than ever. Slowly, she got up and placed a chair in front of the closet. She didn't sleep until sunrise. The following weekend, she went to the library archives to dig into the building's history. West Ridge's 4th floor, she learned, had once been part of a psychiatric annex in the 1940s, before it was converted into student housing. Most of the annex had been demolished, but a small wing, her floor, remained intact. There was almost no information about what happened there, only a vague reference to patient unrest and facility closure due to tragic circumstances. That night, Claire returned to her room with a gnawing sense of urgency. She bolted the door, checked the closet, and settled in. Around 2:14 a.m., she was jolted awake by a sharp, rhythmic tapping. Tap, tap, tap. It came from inside the closet, each strike deliberate, almost impatient. Her body locked in place, her breath shallow. Then, a whisper, faint but clear. Her name. Claire's mind raced. She was alone. She knew she was alone. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone to call campus security. But before she could dial, the tapping stopped. She listened, straining her ears, and in the stillness she could hear it again, that labored breathing. But this time, it wasn't in the hallway. It was inside the room. Her eyes darted to the closet. The chair she placed against the door was now pushed aside. The door stood open just a crack, darkness pooling out like ink. Claire's phone slipped from her hand. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. Slowly, the door opened wider, the hinges groaning softly. The darkness within seemed too deep, too consuming for such a small space. And then, something moved. At first, it was just a vague silhouette, a hunched shape, impossibly thin, its limbs too long, unfolding itself in jerky motions as it emerged. Claire could hear its joints popping as it straightened. The smell of metal was overwhelming now, mingled with something rotting. Image 12, her scream caught in her throat as it stepped forward into the dim light, revealing a face, or what might have once been a face, stretched and pale, with sunken eyes that glistened in the shadows. Its mouth opened slowly, unnaturally wide, but no sound came out. Claire finally found her voice, a hoarse, broken cry, as she lunged for the door. She didn't look back, didn't care if she left everything behind. She tore down the hallway barefoot, the old board shuddering under her feet. Somewhere behind her, she heard the slow, deliberate footsteps again, following. When she reached the security office, she could barely speak. The guards checked her room immediately but found nothing. The closet empty, the air cold but still. They suggested she'd been dreaming, perhaps influenced by the building's history. Claire didn't argue. She accepted the offer to move to another dorm that night. Laura never saw her again, but later, she told another student that she'd heard the breathing too, every night for months before Claire moved in. And sometimes, she still did. It was 1:42 a.m. when I finally decided to pack up my things. The library at Crestview University was nearly empty. Finals week meant they kept it open until 2, but at this hour, only a few desperate students were left scattered between the floors. I'd been studying on the second floor, tucked into one of those wooden cubicles that block out almost everything. My laptop battery had dropped to 5%, so I slid my charger into my backpack and decided to head out. On my way down the main staircase, I noticed something strange. The basement light was on. That shouldn't have been possible. The basement, labeled Archives Staff Only, was always locked after 9 p.m. I'd walked past that door hundreds of times, and it was never open. But now, the heavy gray door was standing wide, just enough for a pale strip of fluorescent light to spill into the stairwell. I paused, listening. The whole building was quiet except for the hum of the lights and the occasional creak from the old pipes. Then I heard it, a sound that didn't belong. Footsteps, slow, deliberate ones, echoing faintly up from the basement. I froze, telling myself it was probably a janitor, but the steps stopped, as if whoever it was had heard me too. The silence that followed was worse than the sound itself. I was about to turn and leave when I caught something out of the corner of my eye. On the dusty tile just inside the basement door were fresh shoe prints. Not boots or work shoes, but sneakers, the kind students wear. I slowly leaned around the doorframe and looked down the first row of shelves. The space was cramped, lined with metal filing cabinets and stacks of cardboard boxes. The air smelled faintly of mold and old paper. Then I saw movement. Someone, a man, stood halfway down the row, his back to me. He was wearing a dark hoodie and jeans, hood pulled up, hands deep in his pockets. He wasn't cleaning, sorting, or doing anything that made sense for being down there. He was just standing still, facing the wall. Library's closing," I said, my voice awkward and too loud in the small space. The man didn't respond. A cold feeling worked its way into my stomach. I took one slow step back, keeping my eyes on him. That's when he moved, not toward me, but sideways, slipping behind a stack of boxes without making a sound. I didn't wait to see more. I turned and went straight back up the stairs, trying not to run, heart pounding in my ears. At the front desk, the night librarian looked surprised when I told her someone was in the basement. She frowned and said, "That's impossible. The basement's locked. I have the only key." I insisted she come look. But when we got there, the basement door was shut tight, locked. No footprints on the floor. No sign of anyone. The next day, I overheard two security guards talking in the campus cafe. They were discussing another basement break-in. Apparently, over the past month, someone had been sneaking into the library at night and hiding until closing, then going down into the basement through an old maintenance hatch in the staff bathroom. They never caught him, and no one knew what he was doing down there. All I know is that I never stayed in the library past midnight again. I still remember the sound of her door. It had a very specific creak, a slow, metallic groan that came from the old hinges, followed by the soft click of the latch. Most nights, it stayed closed, locked like every other dorm room on the third floor of Ridgewell Hall. But that night, I heard it open, slowly, deliberately, long after everyone had gone to bed. Ridgewell Hall wasn't the type of place you'd expect anything strange to happen. It was just another aging building on campus. Ugly beige walls, flickering hallway lights, and the faint smell of detergent and stale coffee. I'd lived there for almost a year without incident, until I met Emily. She had moved in across the hall mid-semester, a quiet transfer student who never seemed to leave her room except for classes. We spoke once, maybe twice. She always had the same blank, faraway look in her eyes. That night in early November, I was lying in bed scrolling on my phone when I heard her door creak open. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe she was going to the bathroom. But then, there was this strange pause. No footsteps. No sound at all. Just the door hanging open. I got up, curiosity gnawing at me, and peered through the tiny peephole in my own door. Her door was open just a few inches, the light from her room spilling weakly into the hallway. But I couldn't see her. I should have left it alone. I should have gone back to bed. Instead, I quietly opened my own door. The air in the hallway felt heavier, cold, the kind of cold that sinks into your bones. "Emily?" I whispered, my voice sounding too loud in the silence. No answer. I took a step closer and noticed something odd. Her light wasn't steady. It flickered, like a candle struggling to stay lit, even though I knew she had a standard desk lamp. I pushed her door open just enough to look inside. The room was dim, the air thick with a damp, musty smell, like wet earth. Emily was sitting at her desk, facing away from me. Her long dark hair hung over her shoulders, and she didn't move, not even when I spoke again. "Emily, are you okay?" She turned her head slowly, painfully slowly, until I could just see her profile. Her lips were moving, but no sound came out. I stepped in, a little shaken, and that's when I saw her hands. They were covered in dirt, fresh, wet soil, packed under her fingernails, smeared across her wrists. "Where did you?" I began, but my words caught in my throat when I saw the wall in front of her. It was covered in pieces of paper, Each one had a drawing, rough, frantic sketches done in black ink. They were all the same, a tall, faceless figure standing at the foot of a bed. And in every drawing, the bed was the same model as the ones in Ridgewell Hall. Before I could react, Emily stood up. Her chair scraped against the floor with a violent screech. She walked toward me, her head tilted slightly, eyes fixed on mine in a way that made my chest tighten. She stopped just a foot away, and in that soft, broken whisper I'd only imagined before, she finally spoke. "He's coming for you tonight." My breath froze. "Who?" I managed to ask, but she didn't answer. Instead, she walked past me into the hallway, leaving muddy footprints on the linoleum. I stood there, heart pounding, trying to make sense of what I just heard. I should have followed her, but fear kept me rooted in place. A minute passed, then another. Finally, I stepped into the hall, but she was gone. Her footprint stopped abruptly halfway down the corridor, as if she'd vanished into thin air. That night, I locked my door and left the light on. I barely slept, every creak and groan of the building making me flinch. When morning came, I forced myself to knock on Emily's door. No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. Later that day, I asked the dorm raw about her. He frowned and told me Emily had moved out 2 weeks ago, but I had seen her. I had spoken to her, and sometimes, late at night, when the hallway is silent, I still hear the creak of her door opening across the hall. It was March of 2009 when Sarah Whitman moved into a basement-level apartment on the campus of Hollow Creek College. Unlike the larger dormitories, these were converted storage rooms beneath the main humanities building, offered only to a handful of students each year who needed cheaper housing. Sarah had taken it without hesitation. She was working 2 part-time jobs and couldn't afford anything else. The basement hallway was long, narrow, and oppressively low-ceilinged, with exposed pipes and a faint chemical smell that never seemed to fade. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed faintly, some of them flickering without ever being fixed. Her apartment was the last on the left, a single-room unit with a kitchenette and a small bathroom. The only window was a small rectangle near the ceiling, barely at ground level, looking out onto a patch of dirt and weeds. From the first week, she noticed the noises. At night, when the building was silent, she could hear what she thought was someone moving in the hallway. Slow, shuffling steps that would stop right outside her door. The first time it happened, she thought it was another resident, but when she checked, the hallway was empty. On the 5th night, she woke to the sound of dripping. She got up, checked the sink and bathroom, then she realized it wasn't water. It was heavier, irregular, and coming from above her bed. Looking up, she saw a faint, dark stain spreading slowly across the ceiling. By morning, it was gone. A week later, she was in bed reading when she heard a faint tapping, 3 knocks, deliberate, from the inside of her wall. It was followed by a slow dragging sound, like something heavy shifting behind the plaster. She froze, listening. Then came the smell. It was sudden and sharp, rot, metallic and foul, so strong she gagged. She opened the window, but the smell lingered for hours. She reported it to maintenance, and a custodian came the next day. He checked the vents, the pipes, the ceiling. "Old building," he said flatly. "Gets weird smells when the heating's on." When she asked about the knocking, he paused, gave her a long look, and then muttered, "Walls down here. They're thicker than you think." 2 nights later, Sarah woke to a noise so loud it shook her bed. Something was inside the wall again, but this time it wasn't just knocking, it was scraping, frantic, like fingernails clawing at plaster. She grabbed her phone, turned on the flashlight, and scanned the wall. The sound stopped. That's when she heard the whisper, faint, right by her ear. "Please." Her whole body went rigid. She backed away from the wall, her phone still shaking in her hand. She barely slept that night, and in the morning, she went to the campus housing office to demand a room change. The woman at the desk told her all other units were full and suggested she make the best of it. By late March, Sarah was sleeping with the lights on. But even that didn't help the night she saw it. It was 3:47 a.m., and she had woken from a shallow, restless sleep to see movement by her window. At first, she thought it was someone walking outside, but her window was at ground level, and the patch of dirt beyond it was fenced off. She sat up, heart pounding, as a shadow passed again, slow and deliberate. The faintest sound of breathing filled the room, not from outside, but from within. She glanced toward the wall, and her stomach dropped. The faint, hairline crack that ran vertically from floor to ceiling now had space, as if the wall had separated slightly, and in that narrow gap, she saw an eye, pale, glassy, and unblinking. She bolted upright, scrambling for the door. As she fumbled with the lock, the scraping started again, this time from inside the ceiling, moving toward her at terrifying speed. She flung the door open and ran barefoot down the basement hallway, not daring to look back. She slept on a friend's couch for the next week, refusing to return alone. Finally, she convinced her friend to come with her to collect her things. The smell hit them before they even opened the door. It was thick, choking, and unmistakable, something dead. They stepped inside, the air heavy and still. Her friend gagged and pulled his shirt over his mouth. That's when they saw it. The wall where she'd seen the crack was now buckled outward, the plaster fractured. Someone had been inside. Campus security was called, and what they found was never officially disclosed. But the rumors spread quickly. Some said it was a squatter who had been living inside the old wall cavities for months, moving between units through maintenance spaces. Others whispered it wasn't human at all, that the walls in the basement had been sealed decades earlier after an incident, and that Sarah's was the first unit to be reopened. Sarah never got her belongings back. Hollow Creek quietly closed the basement apartments that summer, claiming they were renovating for safety compliance. But students still talk about it, how sometimes, late at night, when the campus is still, you can hear 3 slow knocks coming from the ground beneath the humanities building.